So hi everybody, my name is Natalie Lynn Lichtenberg, and just to briefly introduce myself, I've been a Hoffman Estates Schaumburg resident all my life, so I've been in the area for a long while, and I'm going to speak to you about climate change and then exactly what is going on, the science behind that, and then I'm going to pinpoint it down to what is happening locally. I'm going to end off this presentation talking about steps that are currently being taken to address the climate change situation, and then things we can do in our own homes. So this is a first picture of the Earth that we first saw back in December of 1972. It's a picture of the Earth fully illuminated. It changed the way humanity thought about our common home and how we're all connected on this small planet. So just to give you my background, my personal story, when I was younger, my parents took me, I'm an only child, so they took me every summer around the United States, going to all these different national parks. So I was very blessed to see all of the beauty of the United States. This is a picture of me when I was about 10 or 11 years old, and we were at a rest stop. I think this is in Colorado or Utah. And this has ever since been my favorite flower, the Black-Eyed Susan, because of this story. At the rest stop, I went to go pick one of these flowers when my dad harshly yelled at me and told me that I should never mess with nature. Like, don't touch it, just observe it, appreciate the beauty, and then try to preserve it. So I also wanted to tell you guys about my background photo. It is of a whale shark, which I was swimming next to. So this is actually me here. I'm swimming next to this whale shark. I did a whale shark expedition in Mexico off of the Cancun area, where there's a heavy whale shark aggregation in the summer. So I was very blessed also to go on that trip. Yes, it was during the pandemic, but Mexico borders were open, so I did go. So anyway, I've always been a fan of nature and our planets. I've always been an environmentalist and conservationist. I was trained by the Climate Reality Project by Al Gore in Miami in 2015. Ever since then, I've been giving presentations on climate change, both locally and nationally. We do have a Chicago chapter, which I've been heavily a part of. Most recently, I was a West Suburban leader. I was giving presentations at the Schaumburg Library back in 2019. And then just recently, I became a lead for the Chicago chapter, where I am now leading a committee called the Zero Waste Warriors. So we're heavily involved in the zero waste movement and creating less waste in the Chicagoland area. So enough about me. I'm going to get on to the presentation. So must we change? Can we change? And will we change? That has been the question. Mother Nature is now telling us that we must change. The sky is not a vast, limitless expanse the way that it appears to us just by looking up from the ground. In reality, it is just a thin shell of atmosphere surrounding the planet. We are putting 150 million tons of man-made pollution every day. That pollution, especially the carbon dioxide, is building up in that thin shell, trapping the heat. I just wanted to mention that climate change has happened throughout the history of the planet, from the Ice Age to, all different periods I think we're all well aware of. So what I really want to address is the climate change that human activity is now causing and accelerating, and, changing the conditions of our planet such that much of life on Earth will have difficulty living on in the future. So just an explanation of what happens with the solar energy. Energy from the sun comes to Earth in the form of light. Earth absorbs this energy and warms. Some energy will bounce off the Earth in the form of heat. Some bounced back heat is trapped then in the atmosphere, giving us our stable temperature. However, the thickening of the atmosphere causes more heat to be trapped, increasing our environmental temperatures. There's many sources of human-caused pollution. Burning of fossil fuels is a huge one. I also want to emphasize, like plastics, polyester, those are all made from fossil fuels. Agriculture, forest burning, transportation, etc., are all involved in the being a source of carbon dioxide. Fossil fuels still provide more than 80% of the world's energy. They've gone up dramatically since World War II. It recently leveled off briefly, but then now it is also spiking again. It has become quite an issue because carbon dioxide is being released faster than at any other time since the asteroid hit the Yucatan Peninsula and wiped out the dinosaurs 66 million years ago. So you can already see that the air temperatures on Earth have been going up dramatically. So this is a diagram from 1880 to 2018. And so you can see where we are on the right with a really large increase in global surface temperature. Here I'm going to tell you also a story about my life growing up. My dad used to raise saltwater fish. We used to raise them in our basement in Hoffman Estates. So we used to raise clownfish. Commonly, people know them as Nemo fish. And the parent fish would lay the eggs, the female would lay the eggs, and then those eggs would incubate for 10 to 14 days or whatever it was. The point of my story is, though, sometimes in the summer, the tanks in our basement would get a little bit too warm. Even though my dad massively had the air conditioning going, even if the temperature in the water was half a degree higher than what we usually kept it at, the eggs of the fish would hatch a whole day earlier. So my dad was always looking to collect those eggs because we would take those baby eggs, you know, they would hatch and then we would sell those fish. We would raise them and sell them. So if the eggs hatched a day ahead of time before my dad, you know, realized what was going to happen, we would lose that whole batch of fish. And that was just from 1/2 a degree, making a whole day change on that system, you know, for that fish. So just my personal example of what a small temperature can do, small temperature change. So 19 of the 20 hottest years have occurred since 2001. The hottest have been in the last 5 years. Even the last, what is this now? It'll be 7 years. So we all know heat is a problem. It affects us, animals, crops, and our weather. So on a global basis, more than 90% of all extra heat energy trapped in the atmosphere is going into our oceans. This is what is adding to the strength of our hurricanes. Half of the increase in global ocean heat content has occurred in less than the last 20 years. So for example, in Australia, it was 121 degrees. So just recently, 224 locations set an all-time heat record. So we all know, obviously in 2020, at the very beginning, before the pandemic, all those Australia fires, and that's because they had these temperatures of 121 degrees, which is just quite amazing. So here's a picture of the 121 degrees. In the Arctic, ice is now melting in the winter, not just the summer, but it's melting in the winter. This is having serious consequences. Midwinter heat waves in the Arctic are happening in many consecutive years. So any questions or comments I will take at the end of the presentation. So I do see that there's things in chats and people raising their hands, and I will address everyone's questions and concerns and thoughts at the end. So in the Arctic, in June in 2019 in Greenland, instead of ice, these sled dogs are actually pulling their sled over slushy water rather than the snow ice. So this is a picture from Miami Beach in Florida. They have the global sea rise. They're seeing things like octopus in Miami in the streets because you know how they have their tidal flooding, and these flooding events during the summer are getting even higher, raising, and then obviously the ocean is going into the streets of Miami. So if you measure by the assets at risk, Miami is actually number 1 on the list. China is number 2. New York and Newark are number 3. With 93% of extra heat by man going into the ocean, the truth is what happens in the ocean does not stay in the ocean. This increase in heat can be seen even 2,000 meters deep. So if you are a diver, you know that 10 meters equals 33 feet. So that's approximately 6,600 feet down into the ocean. The temperature of the water is actually increasing. That's how far this radiation, the sun, the heat is going down. So, and then half of this increase has occurred, like I said before, in the last 20 years. Here's the damage by extreme weather events as measured by insurance companies. With the extreme temperatures, droughts, fires, floods, mudslides, storms, you can see that, you know, people are really hitting up the insurance companies, and it's costing a lot of money. Here's a picture of a rain bomb. I don't know if any of you have seen one of these in person. I'm going to say hopefully not. I haven't. Even though it looks cool, I wouldn't want to be anywhere near it. These one-time storm events produce tremendous amounts of precipitation in a very small amount of time. It seems like we go through, you know, periods of drought, and then we have these sudden, you know, really heavy downfalls. We've had several of these in the last few years in this area. So this is a chart of the dramatic increase in the number of rain bombs recently, the record-breaking precipitation events. As you can see from this chart, they're going up quite quickly through the years. And obviously we've had some record-breaking floods, both internationally and locally, you know, nationally, like in New Jersey. So this is a picture from the Chicago blizzard about 8 years ago. It's a picture of my parents after the huge snowfall in Chicago during the winter of 2013, 2014. So I'll never forget the day that this picture was taken because it was on my mom's birthday on February 2nd. So speaking of long duration extreme events, storms can stagnate over areas and stay there, literally dumping precipitation, be it rain or snow. So I wanted to address why storm systems are stagnating over areas. And this has to do with the jet stream. So you know that the jet stream goes like this between Canada and North America. And with climate change occurring and the disruption in the atmosphere, it's changing the jet stream. So instead of just being a wave, it's actually becoming a longer, deeper wave, and then it's moving more slow. So this explains why we have these polar vortex events in the winter, where we have these really dramatic, really frigid cold temperatures, and then they stick with us for a long period of time. So yeah, this is like just really even dramatically just changing the jet stream and the way our whole weather system is working. So the same heat that is disrupting our water cycle is also pulling the moisture out of the soil. This means longer, deeper, and quicker droughts. This is why I hate the term climate or global warming, because it incorporates climate change. Some areas are colder than normal and vice versa. So these droughts then lead to heavier, more persistent, and obviously more frequent fire events. So the fire season in the US, such as in California, is 105 days longer than just a few decades ago. So that's a pretty dramatic increase in the number of days. We're all well aware of the California fires that we're constantly hearing about all the time now. With all of this going on, the world could see up to 1 billion climate migrants in this century. So actually, you know, climate is a big reason why people want to immigrate into other countries, because basically they're just looking, you know, for a location where they can eat and have their family and stuff like that. So example, farmers losing their land due to climate change in Syria. So they used to have their farms, and now it's all desert because of the temperature change and then drought. So climate change also affects our global food system. Things that we don't think about. Obviously, there's going to, you know, water availability, but it also affects the nutrition of the food that we're producing. Crops are very sensitive to heat and unexpected freezing events as well. I think we all just recently heard about the Paris events, or I'll just say France, where they had a freeze and lost a lot of their crops. So these crops, with the increasing levels of carbon dioxide in the air, it is changing the nutrient value within these plants, such as rice, wheat, and soybean. So how does climate change affect our health? There's more allergens, there's increased infectious disease, heat stress, mental health, it all ties in. So worldwide, air pollution kills 9 million people every year. And deaths attributable to ambient air pollution, this is just a map of the number of deaths per year. Bangkok, Thailand. El Segundo, California. So what is really becoming apparent is half the people that live in the US are living in areas that don't meet EPA standards. This is becoming a civic rights issue, a human rights issue, an environmental justice issue. So a lot of factories, a lot of pollution causing activities are actually located in lower income areas, subjecting those people to, you know, greater pollution levels, health risks, things that, you know, probably up in Winnetka or places like that, they would never allow that to happen. So I'm an infectious disease guru, so I have a lot of experience with these. Tropical diseases are on the move. Part of this is due to international travel, but also due to changing climate conditions. Because of the changing climate conditions, more more infectious agents, they're able to survive in other areas. So what was once a tropical disease can now live, somewhere in the southern US, things like that. So this is why the tropical diseases are on the move and they're spreading. So climate change also increases the risk of many waterborne infectious diseases, such as hepatitis A, cholera, cryptosporidium, and campylobacter. So, obviously we can get this from our food, but also more than 2/3 of all waterborne disease outbreaks in the US occur in the immediate aftermath after the rain bombs. So where there is a intense flooding event, those waterborne diseases are going to be in that water, and it's actually unsafe to be in. So, if you have broken skin or anything like that, and you come into contact with this contaminated water, it really puts you at risk at being infected. So the increase in the number of these cases is a reason for concern. Another toxic, infectious agent is the toxic red tide seen off the coast of Florida, for example. It may not be affecting us, but it is affecting the fish, the manatees, the sea turtles. This is a whale shark, similar to what I have behind me. These areas with the red tide, they then have less oxygen in the water. And then these organisms are not allowed, they're not able to breathe. I will also say that red tide is also fed into with all of the pesticide and the nutrients that go into our agricultural system. These then run off into the rivers and lakes, such as in Florida, adding to the creating an unequal level of nutrients in the water that is really favorable to this toxic red bacteria. So populations of marine vertebrates have declined 49% on average between 1970 and 2012. Our Great Lakes are being overtaken by invasive species. I think we've all heard about the Asian carp and then the zebra mussels. Climate change helps for the rise in these invasive species because these species tend to be very hardy. They're very adaptable to different ecosystems, whereas our natural, normal animals that live here, they're really adapted to the local environment. So when that environment changes and then an invasive species moves in that is more highly adaptable, that invasive species is going to, expand out and leave no room for our natural flora. So we're now at risk of losing up to 50% of all land-based species. So we've all heard about the Great Barrier Reef in Australia with the coral bleaching. I was actually there in 2014 and I saw some really beautiful reefs. And then, reading the slide, the 2015-2017 bleaching event, it has been the worst ever recorded in the Great Barrier Reef. So when carbon dioxide is in the air and that is going into the water, it creates carbonic acid. So that is what's causing the acidification of our ocean. And then things like these beautiful corals, they're not able to function in that lower pH acidic water. So that's why then the organisms leave the coral and the coral is dying. So the coral can recover if the water quality does go back to normal. But because these bleaching events are becoming more common and more frequent, it's not allowing for enough time for corals to recover before they go through their next bleaching event. So as you may, I do have positive news at the end. Insects are declining at a rapid rate. So This is a beautiful monarch. I'm now part of the Schaumburg Monarch Initiative also, and also the Illinois Monarch Project. But so insects are near and dear to my heart. This was the first monarch butterfly that I raised in my house. Well, near the window, like outside, but I raised her and then I released her right in Hoffman Estates. So insects are at the bottom of the food chain. As we all know, we're all a part of a food web from lower organisms to higher organisms. So as the insects are declining from like climate change, pesticides, all of those, herbicides where their plants are being destroyed, this will also affect our birds and all those higher level organisms, the small mammals that we have in the area. So I'm always trying to encourage people to make sure when they're planting, especially we're planting right now, getting ready to plant in the spring, always be sure to try to plant more native species so that our local insects can be happy and thrive. So let's move on to local climate impacts in the Midwest and Illinois. So the fourth national assessment released last fall by the EPA has a whole section on Midwest impacts. As a major source of agriculture, the agriculture is hurt by severe heat and too much or too little rain. Extreme weather here ranges from torrential rains in Iowa to severe drought in Kansas. So I know in the past few years, we've had some really heavy rain in the springs, and that's made it very hard for farmers to prepare their fields and to get those fields planted. So extreme heat in growing season is especially harmful. So the Great Lakes are getting warmer, which encourages the algae blooms, the invasive species, and a change in fish habitat. Lake area is plagued by algal blooms, for example. Range of temperatures increase since 1969 is approximately 2.7 to 5.2 degrees, depending on the lake. So water levels extreme in the past few years. So climate change has caused a great rain and flooding in recent years. But we will, let's see, safest long-range solution is using nature. So, like in Chicago, the bike path along the lake is now being flooded over by Lake Michigan. Some of the beaches are totally being covered by Lake Michigan. So there's a lot of infrastructure, reconstructing that will need to be done. So working with nature, producing, natural dunes and grasses to absorb some of this overflow rather than concrete seawalls would be a better thing to do. So this is a picture of my friend's house, I believe in Michigan. So let's see. Erie and Ontario were hotter than Lake Michigan. On average was 75.1 degrees Fahrenheit in July 8th last year. So nearly 11 degrees above normal. Was this warm one? It was this warm back in July of 1999. Other Great Lakes had similar increases. So it's because of the blistering heat. We'll go on to the next slide. So I'm sure a lot of you have lived in this area for a while, and anyone who's lived here knows that there used to be a lot more ice cover, both locally at our ponds. I know I used to ice skate every winter in my local pond, and also in the Great Lakes, Lake Michigan used to always have ice cover. So now it's covered for a much shorter time, and it's certainly not as thick enough to walk on or ice skate like it used to be. So another related Great Lakes problem is plastic pollution. 22 million pounds of plastic are produced each year, with 1 billion plastic particles on Lake Michigan's surface were found. from shore, stormwater runoff, washing machines. So washing machines are actually a large contributor to the plastics going into our water system. These plastics, such as polyester, it sloughs off our clothes during the washing cycle, and then it goes into the water system. So we do have like the Calumet watershed where they, filtrate all the water, and then that gets released back into the water system. However, that filtration system does not cover things such as microplastics, medications, hormones, a lot of these other chemicals that we're adding into our water system. Our Great Lakes are critical to our life and our health. It provides 20% of the world's surface water and 84% of North America's. One of the only places to have such a reservoir of fresh water for our use. So we are very lucky here to have so much fresh water at our disposal. This is really, related to the Chicagoland area and around, Indiana, Michigan, where we have all of this fresh water for our personal use. So other places such as Arizona and stuff, they don't have that luxury. So feel very lucky. Projections for Illinois. Heat and rain are the top two problems. Temperatures are already up 1% since the start of the Industrial Revolution and expected to rise another 2.5 degrees Fahrenheit. Days over 95 will be much greater downstate. So going back to my fish raising story in my dad's basement, half a degree changed the hatching of those fish by a whole day. So if we are already above 1 degree Fahrenheit in change, imagine all the life systems that are being changed by that temperature change. Projections for Chicago is more heat. Heat waves are likely in Chicago. Temperatures have already risen 2.5 degrees since 1980. Cities have an increased heat island effect based on how much is paved and how much more energy is being used, like in industry or, all of our air conditioning units and all that stuff. So what are Illinois, Cook County, and Chicago doing already? So we have already passed the Illinois Future Energy Jobs Act, FEJA. This landmark bill passed in 2017 is now being implemented. RPS, which is the last thing there, means Renewable Portfolio Standard and commits ComEd to purchase 25% renewable energy by 2025. Solar energy is growing under FEJA, providing many clean energy jobs. The community solar program will let people whose homes are not amenable to solar to purchase panels in community solar arrays in parking lots or on community buildings and in vacant lots. So I'm not sure what Schaumburg has, but Hoffman Estates recently implemented a community solar program where you actually had to opt out if you did not want to have some of the, to buy into some of the renewable energy. And that is still through ComEd. So this is very, very new. The Clean Energy Jobs Act was recently introduced into Springfield. So it was introduced in the past year or two, and then it did not make it through. So this year, they're reintroducing this spring a new version of CEJA that incorporates environmental justice. So this will decarbonize the electric grid by 2030, 100% clean energy by 2050. It is creating a path to electrifying transportation, and it gives priority to jobs and economic opportunities in the clean energy, renewable energy field. So I know through Climate Reality Project Chicago chapter, people are working very hard on electrifying the public transportation system, both with the buses and then school buses. And then I know Governor Pritzker also just announced his own clean energy bill, which just came out, the news just came out today. So hopefully there will be some sort of collaboration and, you know, give and take to hopefully get some sort of bill put through. But it's very awesome that Governor Pritzker is actually, you know, really interested in pushing forward the clean energy initiative. So what Cook County is doing, Cook County has a sustainability website. Among accomplishments are reducing emissions in their buildings, mostly by increasing their efficiency. They're cutting down landfill waste, reducing emissions, so on and so forth. Buildings involved in this include courthouses, the county jail, administrative buildings, and health facilities throughout Cook County. So Cook County has pledged 100% carbon neutral by 2050. The board president asked last month for a plan on how to get there and to have it created within the next year. So likely steps to meet the county goals. In a news release, they said these are some of the ways they will get there. So put solar panels on county buildings, purchase off-site renewables, and participate in community solar. So yeah, definitely be on the lookout for community solar. And if any of you guys know what's going on in Schaumburg, please feel free to educate me when I'm done here. But this is really the way to go if you don't want to put the solar panels directly on your house. Mayor Rahm Emanuel pledged in February of 2020 that the city will reach 100% renewable energy for all of its buildings within the city, both public and private. Mayor Lightfoot and the City Council endorsed Emanuel's pledge. The city is now looking and working on a climate plan. Buildings are the first target since they produce the most greenhouse gases. Timeline for a Chicago plan. With the help from nonprofits, the city's sustainability director has researched 12 North American cities for best practices and reached out to community groups, builders, unions, utilities, and other stakeholders to induce them or to include them in the plans. So you can see that they're working currently on policy development, and that'll be interesting. Some steps Chicago has already taken. Let's see, joined a global covenant of mayors, hosted North American Climate Summit, one of the 20 cities to win Bloomberg's Challenge Grant, pledged city buildings 100% renewable by 2025. So this is just a picture of Mayor Emanuel on the Shedd Aquarium roof. Museums like the Shedd Aquarium and Field Museum are helping Chicago reach its clean energy goals. I've personally started working with the Shedd Aquarium. They are highly involved in this movement of working on a climate plan. So they have a really huge Shed the Plastic initiative, a zero waste initiative, obviously a solar initiative and being more efficient. So if anyone has questions about that afterwards, I can talk to you about that. So Chicago was named one of 7 LEED Platinum cities in the world. LEED means Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design. The U.S. Green Building Council sets qualifications. Platinum is the highest level. Heating, cooling, use of the sun, permeable paving, outdoors, green roofs are all a part of it. There's many different components. So Chicago's sustainability programs under Emanuel that were started is improving bike infrastructure, LEDs, Green Office Challenge, benchmarking large buildings, so on and so forth. They created 248 miles of bike lanes. So what can you do? One thing you can do is sign up for renewable energy, your community solar, eating a more plant-based diet, agriculture, especially cows. They are They create a lot of emissions for climate change. Avoid using single-use plastics, plant more trees and native plants, buy carbon offsets when you fly. These are just examples. So I do recommend reading the book Drawdown. I have a picture of that at the end of this presentation, but it has many, many ideas for what you personally can do. So the number one thing you can do today is to eat a plant-based diet. So I'm not like promoting veganism or anything like that, but I will say that agriculture, animal agriculture, can be quite nasty and does add to climate change in large amounts. I myself have been vegan for over a year, but I was a vegetarian for a long time, and I'm very happy with my food choices. So let's see, plant-based diets. Raising livestock accounts for nearly 15% of global greenhouse gases emitted each year. Some say up to 50%. So overconsumption, eating too much animal protein has been shown to lead to certain cancers, stroke, heart disease, also thereby raising healthcare costs. So I can attest to this personally, just switching over to a plant-based diet, that my inflammation, my joint pain, my migraines, all these things have decreased, and I get up at about 3 a.m. and I go to bed about 8:39 p.m. and I never take a nap. I have very steady energy throughout the day. Altering meat consumption patterns is critical to achieving various goals, including hunger around the world, healthier lives, water management, terrestrial ecosystems, and of course, climate change. So it's a win-win for all. Recent research suggests that climate solutions of this magnitude lie in the hands of individuals or as close as the dinner plates. So these are just a few of the, I just put some, websites if someone wanted to do a screenshot of this, or, I could send them to you later, but take a picture. So other ways that food management can negate climate change is the restoration of farmlands. Common agricultural practices deplete fertility, erode soil, and cause compaction. Farmlands are often abandoned. I'm going to say farmlands are usually abandoned and left unused as farmers move on to greener pastures. Those lands then are not good for anything. The soil is so depleted. So repurposing these abandoned farmlands can be costly and labor intensive, but would help to eliminate greenhouse gas emissions. This is also one of my climate chapter's initiatives now, is the regenerative agricultural movement, where those restoration is turning that back into native habitats and establishing tree farms, or they intermix native plants with the actual farming, the actual thing that they're trying to grow. So currently there are a few financial incentives to move forward with any of these ideas. So other ways that food management can negate climate change is food waste. Overserving at restaurant, forgotten leftovers. Personally, myself, I'm trying to get composting started in Hoffman Estates. So it's something we're looking into. Hopefully we're going to be going with collective resource. I myself right now, since I don't have composting, I toss it out my door under the bush. But anyway, that's just me. I'm a little different. So the number one resource of all in getting through all of this is human resiliency. So the one thing that you can do every day is lead by example. So like if you're at a store and you want to refrain from using a single-use plastic bag, I always insert a nice, friendly environmental message and then post it on social media. If it didn't happen, if you didn't post it, then it didn't happen. So I know it can kind of feel silly, but it's amazing how much people, when they see that, they feel inspired to take their own action. And I realize that right now at COVID, there's some places that will only use the single-use plastic bags. I'm taking the items that I purchase out back to my car, and then I'm rebagging them in my own reusable bags at my trunk. So to stay uplifted, look for progress, get yourself in a good place, and do the good self-care, friends, family, all that good stuff. Seek inspiration, from those people that you feel are good leaders. Fill your news feeds on your social medias, with good things. Obviously we're all working on that. And actions lead to hope. I know through this whole pandemic, it's been pretty tough. And the one thing that has kept me going is working on these climate change things. Especially with, using Zoom now, I'm able to be on 6 or 7 different committees at a time. It means I don't have much free time, but I feel very lifted that I'm actually doing something to help. So these are just some action pictures of me getting involved locally. The bottom left is me doing a recycling event for Hoffman Estates and then giving presentations. So this is the book I was talking about, Drawdown by Paul Hawken. And if you haven't read it, I do highly suggest it. The Climate Reality is currently holding a training now, virtual training. But if you want to learn more about the Climate Reality Project, just go to climaterealityproject.org. So, and then we do have our Chicago chapter. And this is a link for you to join if you wanted to join our chapter. Okay, so this is some of our chapter programs that we're doing right now. We have a presentations group, Suburban Sustainability, which I'm a part of. So I am Hoffman Estates Sustainability Commission's co-chair. So I work heavily with the sustainability for Hoffman Estates. I also lead the Zero Waste Warriors group for Climate Reality Project Chicago. Like I already mentioned, we're doing electrification of public transportation. They're working on CEJA, federal advocacy. We have a youth action group, and we're also working on regenerative agriculture. So with that, I will take pictures. I will take questions. That's what I meant. I'll look in the chat to see if there's anything there. So does anybody have any questions? Or I know somebody had their hand raised at one point. So yeah, the chemicals in the water, such as the hormones and the medicines, those are definitely not being filtered out. So like insulin, all of the medicines that we take, obviously they go through our body systems and then we eliminate them and they go into the water system. So those are affecting fish. Obviously they're affecting all the water animals and things that live there. Plastic particles, our waters are loaded with microplastics. So one thing I need to do is to fit my washer with one of those filters. So that's next on my agenda. So what can you do with empty medication containers? I believe you can take them back to Walgreens. I know Hoffman Estates, we have a recycling extravaganza in August where people can take all of their empty medication or their full medication and we dispose of them properly. I wouldn't be too concerned about purifying your tap water. It is safe to drink, and personally I drink out of the tap because I feel that drinking bottled water is not with all the plastic. So what is the, for my washing machine, I would have to look up the brand name. Let's see if I could do that real fast. So actually there's a bunch of them. Let's see, back to Zoom. I don't necessarily have the brand name, but if you want to email me at nat018 @hotmail.com, I can get a brand name for you. Oops. Oh, panelists. Yeah, I'm just putting my email in the chat so that if you guys want to contact me after this, such as for the brand name for the washing machine filter, I can get that for you. So that's interesting about the Schaumburg Township. It has a weatherization assistance program that replaced your furnace and air conditioner. That's an excellent idea. Is that something they do all the time? Or is that program no longer in effect? Does anyone else have any questions? So with that, then I'll say that my presentation is done. And if you guys want to contact me, my email is in the chat, and I will talk to you soon.